Good evening and welcome to the Mental Health Hour on Love Bay, Afrobeat, and Talk Radio. You're tuning into our very first Real Talk Tuesday, a space where we have raw, honest conversations about the realities often left unspoken in our communities. I'm your host, Felicia Fischhoff, registered psychotherapist, and founder of Rooted in Resilience Psychotherapy and Wellness. And tonight, we're digging deep into a powerful theme. What does it mean to be a strong Black woman? Yes, we're going there tonight. For generations, Black women have carried the weight of strength with pride, but also with pain. Our resilience has been celebrated, but often at the cost of our rest, our softness, and sometimes our well being. So tonight, we're asking, at what cost? And how can we honor our strength without abandoning ourselves in the process? I'm honored to be joined by two incredible women that I respect so much, who bring both clinical expertise and lived experience to this conversation. Shanique Edwards is a psychotherapist, nationally recognized speaker, and founder of the Eden Legacy Foundation. She serves as a Black mental health clinician with NACCA, director with the Canadian Black Nurses Alliance, and consultant with Black Mental Health Canada. Shanique is deeply respected for her work in racial trauma, Afrocentric mental health, and knowledge translation. Whether she's facilitating national conversations or working directly with youth, her focus is clear: collective healing, representation, and liberation. Charlene Lekx is a registered psychotherapist, a Christian life coach, and EMDR certified clinician. With extensive experience in trauma, relationships, and faith based counseling, Charlene bridges psychological insight with spiritual grounding. She's passionate about guiding individuals and organizations toward emotional resilience, breaking intergenerational cycles, and building legacies rooted in purpose and wholeness. Together, we'll unpack the unspoken expectations, survival strategies, and the emotional toll behind the strong Black woman label, and explore what it means to make space for vulnerability, softness, and self compassion in a world that often tells us to just keep going. But before we begin, please note the content shared on tonight's episode is for educational and discussion purposes only and does not replace therapy or professional mental health support. If you're struggling, we encourage you to seek care from a qualified mental health provider in your area. So now, let's get into it. This is Real Talk, and it starts right here. So welcome, Charlene and Shanique.
Hey girl, how you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well.
Feeling
Awesome.
good.
Awesome. So, as you know, I am so excited for tonight's conversation where we just throw the gloves off and, we're just going to have real talk because I think this is what we need and this is what we're used to as a people
Yeah.
where it's not about being like super polished or anything like that. It's just about sharing our real insights based on our lived experience and what we've noticed as therapists even. So, you know, when we came up with this topic, what does it mean to be a strong Black woman? We knew that this would be a powerful topic tonight. So why don't you just share with the Love Bay family, why is it so important for us to talk about this tonight?
Well, I actually want to start off by saying where we were when we came up with this topic because I think that's important, right? If we're gonna be real, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Why don't you share? Where were we?
Right? We were at the spa, right? We were taking a day for ourselves, just to pamper ourselves, just to actually
Yes.
take some time to rest. And
Yep.
all of us were busy. All of us were feeling all of the stuff that's going on, right? We're running businesses, we have families, like there's so much.
Yeah.
And so we took the time out to actually just take care of ourselves, to fill our cups a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's in that space that we actually came up with this concept. Let's talk about this, because this is something that we definitely experience. And if we're experiencing it, we know we got aunties, we got cousins, we got moms who are also experiencing it too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm just going to throw myself under the bus, because I know that day I almost canceled like probably 5 times.
Yes, you did.
Notice I didn't call you out though.
Absolutely. I was like, guys, I don't think I could come. I'm so stressed. Like, I have so much going on. And you guys are like, Felicia, even if it's for a couple of hours, you need to stop. You need to practice what you preach and come on out. And I was like, oh, but that's why we need community, to call each other out, right?
Yes.
Because even just feeding back into this theme about being this strong Black woman, we feel like we have to be the Energizer Bunny. That we have to keep going and going and going, right? But it always has a cost.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would, equally add that it's not so much also that we feel that we need to, it's almost like we have to, right? Like we have to keep the wheels going, because if we don't, then who, right? And I think, the power of community is really important. And, oftentimes we do find that in our sisterhood. But, we need that community to extend outward if we're really going to not overfunction in this space.
Absolutely.
I think you need to say that one more time, Shanique, because I think somebody needs to hear that again.
No, honestly, because as I was thinking about this, I was like, a part of this is not just us taking on this mantle, right? It's because we have to. We gotta take care of the kids and our partners and run our businesses and all the other things that we're doing. Because if not, then who, right? And even though we might have this collective grouping, like, for example, like what we have in terms of we were able to go to the spa and think about this, but at the same time, we had to be so intentional about that. And I could just imagine like all of the things that had to be put in place just to ensure that we could have had that time too, right? And so we're constantly in this, roller coaster of over functioning, which is not necessarily a byproduct of choice. It's, we have to.
Absolutely. So I know that there's different arguments about the strong Black woman. In some senses, it is rooted in our survival. Like the reason why we feel we have to pick this up is because if not, we're going to fall apart. Right? And so we have no choice. And, we should stop saying that we shouldn't be the strong Black woman, right? But what's your take on that? Because I feel like it's a two-edged sword in a way, right? Because yes, of course, there's like we have to be strong. We know that. But can we be strong, but be a healthier, stronger version of ourselves? And what does that look like? And what does that mean?
I think that if we're going to talk about this topic, we also have to talk about internalization. Right. So what are the messages that we've internalized from the time we were little girls, as we're looking around at the people around us, as we're watching how they are going, like you said before, right, to the point of burnout, and they still have to get up and keep going anyway. Right. So that's what we're grown up like looking at and seeing and internalizing. Now you also have to look at the culture. And the culture is then giving messages about Black womanhood too, that we're then taking in and we're internalizing also. So we're also getting the message from history, from ancestry. It's bombarding us from all of these different areas. So by saying that we have a choice, do we actually have a choice? Because when you're internalizing all of those different messages from all of those different sources for so long in your life, do you really have a choice about it? Or do you then just like start doing it because it's what's expected, it's what's known, and you just do it?
I mean, I would add too that, we've come to a place where we've really worked on renaming that for ourselves. What does it mean to be a strong Black woman? What does it mean for me to be a strong Black woman, right? And every season of our lives, as we go through different transitions and we experience different things, we're constantly revisiting that definition of it. I think, to tag along with what Charlene was saying there is that even as we try to reframe that for ourselves, there's this flood wave that essentially like sometimes can completely engulf us, that it's hard to stand in our, reality of how we want to define that for ourselves with the rest of the messaging that we're getting, both, from ancestry, but also from modern day culture, and the expectation that we have then to, contort ourselves into these different, variations of what other people think in terms of what does it mean to be a strong Black woman. Well, my mom did, my grandmother did, right? And when you bring this into different spaces, we're constantly bombarded with, putting on other people's garments that don't really fit us, right? And when we try to walk out in our own, we're then hit with the rejection, or we're hit with the you're being too much, whatever the messaging that we are receiving. So I would totally agree, it's a double-edged sword. Not to say that I have the perfect answer how to address it, but I do want to acknowledge like how it looks in terms of it being a double-edged sword.
So we're, both of you kind of touched on the fact that in order to really tackle this topic, we have to look at the younger versions of ourselves, right? And the younger versions of ourselves obviously look at the generations before to see how things are done, especially many of our cultures. We're all storytellers. We learn through the stories of our ancestors that have been passed down. We learn from the experiences around us. And I think we have to even dig a little bit deeper and kind of look at like, what were we actually seeing? So even if you guys wanted to like share just a little bit, like as a little girl growing up, what did you see?
I think it's interesting because one of the projects that we had to do at school was to write about our family history, right? Like we were really taught about family systems. And when I was doing the interviews, you have to go and interview all the people in your family, including those who've been cut off. It's exciting, right? Because you're like, ooh, why did you get cut off? Why did you leave? Tell me, spill the tea. And so one of the things that I heard over and over and over again was the strength of my grandmother, right? And they told the stories. All of the aunties told stories about like how she would get up at 5 a.m, get the girls together, go over to the bread shop to purchase like actual like loaves of bread from the like the wooden oven. She would put it on her head, like make a kata, we called it, put it on her head, and she's walking, holding her girls' hands, right? Would reach up and grab a loaf of bread, break it, and give it to them, and then they drop them off at school and then go and sell the bread. And they talked about how when she wasn't doing that, she was working at the stone mines, she was working as a migrant farmer, she was doing all of these different jobs. And so it's almost kind of like I got the messaging about my grandmother being this this hustler, this grinder, like we talk in this today's day and age about like, oh, you gotta grind. And it's like, no, Black women have been grinding forever. And so at this point, have we come to a place as Black women where we don't have to grind anymore?
And, I would love to say the answer to that is yes. But I think a part of, basing it on what you're saying, we need to get to a point where if we're grinding, it's because we want to. not because we have to, right? Because for some people that is kind of their way of being, right? And they like that, the hustle and the bustle. And, I just think of people, working downtown and, that type of vibe. But the reality of it is that, like, yeah, we do need to get to a point where we don't have to do that because we have enough resources, enough support. We have enough people who recognize that we have grinded enough, right? Like, and I think that is a bit of, at least from my personal experience, and also just what I see, with some of my clients too, is that there are no safe spaces to just be, right? You're always on in some capacity, or there's always this expectation for you to be on. And so, and maybe this is a part of also the double-edged sword, is that, it's hard to even maybe recognize those spaces when they do show up too, because we're so used to not having those spaces available to us. And so, I think, in line with that, I have an equal story in terms of my mother and my grandmother, and, being legal hustlers out here, just trying to make ends meet and do all the things to ensure, the success of the kids. But I don't know if that has necessarily changed with my generation. I would like to think that, we're creating room now by having these conversations and being more vigilant about it, by actually, like, having spaces where, like, for example, yeah, we are going to go to the spa. We might be tired, we might be burnt out, we might have a lot going on, but we're going to be very intentional about that and really kind of cultivating our own, I guess, quote unquote, safe spaces. But I don't know if we're 100% there yet.
And I don't know that we ever will be. Like, I think that this requires movement and intentionality. It requires being present to yourself and present to your own experiences. It requires honesty and actually having people in your life who do hold you accountable, right? To say, I'm noticing that you seem a little bit tired, right? Do you need to rest, right? Do you need to take a break? What's happening with you right now? Like, I think we need a whole lot of community, and not just our partners, or, for those who have children, not just our children, but we need, and not just your girlfriends, like, we need a whole community, we need a whole village. And that's what we used to have before. And that's what we don't have in this nuclear society up in, in these North American westernized spaces.
Absolutely.
I think that, there's a danger also in, as good as it is to look towards the previous generations. Of course, we honor the generations that have come before us, but rest looks differently in every culture. Because even as you were talking, Shar, I was just thinking about, okay, yes, so grandma would be, getting up in the morning, but I wonder if grandma also sat under the mango tree, and was eating mangoes and took that rest, right?
Yeah. And she did. She held court, right? Other women would come from around the neighboring area, and they would just be chilling and talking and telling stories. I remember as a kid, just like being that nosy kid, just like literally like just like listening because I want to hear all the details, but that, if they see you, they're gonna like tell you to move, right? So it's like I got really good at just like right. But I think the other thing too that I think that we should address is the fact that this is systemic, right? And so it's not just that Black women are kind of like caught in this loop of doing this strong Black woman, superwoman trope. It's also that we have a system that reinforces it. And so even things like when we go to the hospital, right? I'm thinking back, you remember Serena Williams, like back a few years ago, and she had her daughter. Even when we go to the hospitals, like they think that our pain tolerance is somehow higher than another woman's pain tolerance, right? We're given these messages. So even things as simple as going to the doctors, going into the hospital for something that's joyous, something that's miraculous, we can't focus in on the experience of it alone, because we are then focused in on having to be an advocate for ourselves too, right? So we can't just be present with, oh, this is so miraculous, this is so wonderful, this is so great. We have to then be like, okay, am I being taken care of okay? And if you don't have community to advocate for you, then you're the one advocating for yourself. So I think there's more than meets the eye with this whole concept of being the strong Black woman.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And if I can add to, the thing that's coming to my mind is this idea of being too much, right? We safeguard a lot of that hypervigilance and that self-advocacy that shows up for us because we don't want to be perceived as, too much. And I just think about, the example that Charlene brought up is, I had that exact same thing happen to me. I went into the hospital in extreme pain. But I mean, I've learned how to conduct myself, in the midst of public so that I don't come across, any type of way, right? Because already I'm coming in Black, right? So if I'm coming in, with the full throttle of how much pain that I'm in, it's going to look a lot different, right? And I'm going to be perceived a lot different. But I remember sitting there and I had, the doctor come up and be like, "Oh, you look like you're fine." Like, I'm not okay. And it actually took a Black nurse being like, "I can see she's in pain. I can see it in her eyes that she's in pain." Right. I mean, this pain was so excruciating. I couldn't even articulate what I needed to say and all of this, which, but I just didn't want to come across as being too much. And I think about, how many times, as we try to balance this, stereotype with, okay, where do I need to mask? Where do I need to code switch? How do I make sure that I'm still doing all the things that I need to do? Like the emotional labor that goes into, managing this. And as, Charlene said, it's systemic, right? It's not anything that we can really escape unless, of course, we're going to start to be honest with ourselves and honest about what that change looks like and the accountability and all of those pieces.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we do have to carry a lot all at once, right? So there's this part that's a true authentic self, right? That we walk in, we live in when we're with our family or when we're in our safe space, when we're with our girls, it comes out. We don't have to hide, right? Right? We can laugh the way we want, we can lime the way we want, right? But then when we're in these different spaces, we know that if we don't bring other things too, we're either going to be overlooked, we're either going to be labeled as something. We can't just be. And I know like the messaging out there is like, just be yourself, we embrace you, inclusion, which it's great that it is it's out there, but is that the actual reality that we experience on the day-to-day?
And I think one of the issues there is that, and this is, anybody who's ever had any conversation with me around inclusion knows this is my argument. Having the thoughts without the accountability is useless, right? So this idea of being inclusive, this idea of you can just be here, right? But when when I am myself here, right, then I end up becoming labeled other things, right? And I think about it in terms of corporate spaces, right? How often now we're told, of course, we want your perspective. Of course, we want your input. But when I actually, share the fact that like that was a microaggression, that's really harmful to share with any, or to say to any Black person, much less a Black woman, right? Then that's when things become a little bit murky, right? Like we're not really allowed to unless you're actually in the mold, which then makes me have to think about, okay, then how authentic can I really be in these spaces, right? And so, it becomes a clash between what I know how people define this idea of my strength, because it's not defined oftentimes in the systemic lens in a positive way. It's defined as aggressive or difficult or hard to handle or just too much, right? Whereas I also know how I want to define the strength, and for me that's assertive, right? That's me self-advocating, that's me being confident. And that conflict sometimes, it's like, is it even worth it? in that
Yeah.
moment to really and truly try to, you know, power to the people and try to press
Yeah.
along in that lane.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I know that, like even in my work with clients, like it's just that, like they can't even sit down quietly without being labeled as being angry
Hmm.
or,
Mhm.
or being upset about something or in a bad mood or like, so it's like they can't even be.
Mhm.
We're just expected to skin our teeth in a very unnatural way for those that are listening and can't see my face right now, right? And be something that we're not. We're not allowed to carry our emotions authentically. And all of that comes with a cost.
Mhm. And that's what I was actually even thinking as you were both sharing. What is the cost? The cost really is having to then have this chronic stress,
Hmm.
right?
Mm,
And as you're going through life with this chronic stress, it leads to inflammation in the body. And then it leads to all of these negative health outcomes later on. As Black people, as Black women, how many of us are like experiencing the fallout from the stress,
Yep.
the fallout from living in this stressful way all the time? This is 24/7, 365. We
mhm,
don't get to take this off,
Mm.
mm, mm.
right? And so it's affecting all of us. So we can't just say, okay, well, we're going to keep. No, we have to figure out ways to navigate forward, even when the systems don't want us to.
Mhm.
Mm.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, nothing upset me more than, when we were going through the pandemic and they were saying how at risk our people was. And I'm like, all of this is connected to the hardships that we experience. It has an impact on our body. And
Hmm.
we don't realize that our mental health is connected to our physical health.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that is all a part of the cost, right? When we show up with the high blood pressure, when we show up with all of these things, the cholesterol, it all like why are Black people or people of color more predisposed to these things?
Hmm.
There's a reason. And I
Mhm.
think that we don't realize that, it all is connected to the way we see ourselves, our mental health, the way we take care of ourselves. Like it all matters.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I think that connection, between the psychological and the physical, right? And especially for our community, a lot of our psychological shows up in the physical. It shows up in those
Yeah.
somatic systems. It shows
Hmm.
up with the stomach pain, with the headaches, with the heart flutters, all of those things that when you go to the doctor, for all intents and purposes, everything seems fine. Everything seems fine, but that something is wrong with you. And that is a huge tell that perhaps there's something going on with your mental health. Perhaps the
Hmm.
stress of everything that you have been dealing with is getting to you. And I think, one of the things that I love is that there are a lot more of us who are realizing that like therapy cannot be a last resort, right?
Hmm.
Going and looking about our mental wellness cannot be a last resort. It
Yeah.
has to be first. It has to be the thing that we prioritize. And so even kind of going back to like how this all came about was because, this was your sisters looking out for you,
Mhm.
Felicia, and being like, no, we know you're busy. We
Yeah.
know you're tired. We know you got a lot going on, but this needs to come first. Your rest needs to
Hmm.
come
Absolutely.
first, right? And so I
Absolutely.
think that ties in beautiful with what Shar was saying in terms of, it is important to have those communities that will
Yeah.
keep you accountable, right? It's not a
Hmm.
matter of, yeah, I mean, obviously we would love to have your presence, right? But we also knew that it was more to that, right? Because we would want
Yeah,
somebody to do that for us,
of
right? We would want
course.
somebody to say, like, no, come. Don't let anything stand in the way of that, of what
Of,
you need
Hmm.
right now.
And
absolutely.
not everybody can do a spa day
True.
because they
Hmm.
can't afford it,
Of
right?
Yeah.
course.
Or they can't afford in terms of time, even, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
However, like I remember last year, we decided that we're gonna like read Rest is Resistance.
Yes.
So all
Mhm.
three of us got the book, and we worked at it at our own pace when we could. We got together, we
Mhm.
discussed. But I think these are the movement forward. Like these are the little incremental movements forward where we actually just choose, we got to do something better. We got to do something different. And this is what it looks like for me in this particular season. Doesn't mean it's forever, but for this moment, this season, this is helpful.
Mhm. I just wanted to put it out there to our Love Bay family. Please message us in the chat. That's what the chat is here for. We want to hear from you. If you have any questions, please reach out. We'd be more than happy to answer the questions. So it's there for you, Love Bay family. Chime in. Yes, Rest is Resistance. That book shook me to my
Mm-hmm.
core.
Girl.
I was like, Trisha, you shouldn't do me so. No. it forced me to look at rest.
Mm-hmm.
It forced me to look at rest with intention.
Yeah.
And I have to go back through it because I don't think you could read it just once.
No, I agree. I
Mm-hmm.
agree.
Right? Because it has to be an internalized change and shift.
Mm-hmm.
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 Yeah.
And I
Yep.
think, one of the things that that book particularly made me personally realize is my relationship with between the strong Black woman and the concept of laziness versus productivity. And
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
really had, and I mean, I still am working through this idea that taking a pause does not equate to me being lazy, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm-hmm.
we think about what rest gives to us, an opportunity for healing, an opportunity for creativity, an opportunity for ourselves to like slow down enough to really kind of see, the bigger picture of what's going on in front of us. But I
Mm-hmm.
wrestled with that because everything that I knew about this, idea of what it means to show up and to be strong and to be productive has not, there's rest is not even a part of that equation, right? And so and I think about that now as we're talking about this and this relationship between this idea that we have to give up something in order to get something else, but
Mm-hmm.
things can coexist, right? You can still be productive, you could still be strong, but you can still rest, you could still pause, you can still redefine what this all looks like for you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue, Shanique, that we are actually more productive when we rest,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
right? We could be tired,
Mm-hmm.
beyond tired, but tired.
Yep.
And we're trying to work through a project, we're trying to clean, whatever it is. And it's taking us forever because we're forgetting things. We don't know we're exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
But once we take a rest, we actually can get through it quicker,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's almost like a fallacy that we can't rest because we're lazy, because really if we don't rest, we're not going to be productive.
Mhm.
Yeah. And where did we learn that lie? That we
Mm.
have to keep going, and we're not allowed to rest because if we rest, we're actually being lazy. Where did we learn that lie?
Slavery.
Yeah. Right? 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 There was an
Look at that.
objective. Yeah, there was
Yep.
an objective behind that lie. Somebody was profiting off of that lie that they told us. And so all of these years later, it's important that we actually like look back and debunk these messaging that we've internalized.
Mm-hmm.
It's not true that we're lazy if we need to rest. It's wise. It's discerning if we
Yes.
actually take the time to slow down, pay attention to what's happening inside of us, and then give ourselves what we need, fill up our buckets so we can move forward with more intentionality.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes our bodies will speak before our mind ever does.
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you are able to slow it down and pay attention to what's happening within you, right? Um, then when it comes down to really processing those thoughts, you got a lot of information, because that's, that's what I tell my clients all the time. What's happening in your body is information, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's telling you
Mm,
this works for you, this doesn't work for you. I like this, I don't like this. I want this, I don't want that, right? If we
mhm,
really paid attention to those cues, right, it would give us so much in terms of what do we need to fill that bucket? Because that
mhm,
becomes the other question, right? Okay, fine, I
Mm-hmm.
know I need my bucket filled, but what does that look like, right? What do
Mm-hmm.
I need? And so spending that time with yourself is so pivotal, because what you need is different than what I need. And you
Mm-hmm.
can't tell me what
mm,
I need. I need to tell me what I
mhm.
need.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I want us to slow down what you just said, because I think that that's so important. Listening to our cues.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm,
Because, even as you shared that, Shanique, the image came to mind, we're eating food and it's hurting our stomach. But we
mhm,
keep eating the food, even though we know it's making us sick,
Mm-hmm.
because we're ignoring the cues. And then when we get sick, oh, why are we sick?
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we missed out on the cues that our body was giving us, and we fed it the junk anyway,
Yeah.
even
Mm-hmm.
though it wasn't serving us.
Mm. And
And I
how
think that,
often,
yeah, go ahead, Shanique.
oh, I was just going to piggyback on that piece and just say, how often do we do the thing that's not serving us in, our, I guess our ambition to kind of hold strong to this mantle of what it means to
Mm,
be that strong Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
mhm, mhm,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's really interesting because even as we were kind of like discussing this idea of a strong Black woman, the thing that's even at the back of my mind and niggling is this whole thing about like Black women, how we show up in terms of depression very differently.
Mhm.
We are so high functioning. We
mm,
get it done. We go
mhm,
and we get the kids and we take them to all of the activities, and we go to work and we deal with all of the pressures and all of the people and all of the drama, and we are supportive of everybody, and
mhm.
like we're looking out for the community. Oh my goodness. And we're still depressed while doing it,
Yes.
right? Nobody could tell, right? That auntie so and so is depressed, nobody could tell. And so this is why like it's so important to recognize that how it looks on us might be different than how it looks on other people, based
Mm,
on our lineage, based on our history, based on the expectations of strength that are superhuman. Even
uh-huh.
Clark Kent took off his cape, right? And yet here we are, just like going, right? We
Yeah.
need to have more people saying, take off the cape. It's
Yes.
not serving you,
Mm.
Mm.
right? It's not serving you, right? And the beauty about like our friendship is that we can just say it to each other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh my
Mhm,
god.
mhm. Or find a cape that fits you, because the cape you're wearing was one that you inherited. It wasn't actually yours. And it's not to say that you necessarily inherited it from your grandmother or your mother. Sometimes we take it on based on just how we have navigated through life. Well, my boss said I needed to be like this. And, I was in a relationship and my partner said I needed to be like that. And so we built together and quilted together this cape that like is completely looks like,
Mhm.
drab clothes. And it's like, no, that's not the cape for you either. You need to redefine, because the reality too, I think, kind of going back to Felicia's initial point, is that we don't necessarily want to take that cape fully off. I think that's our superpower as Black women, is that we
Mhm.
can still show up, but we need to be able to do it in a healthy way, in things that work for us, things that are actually, beneficial for us, and that will essentially turn the tide of this in terms of legacy, in a way
Mhm.
that our next generation of women are not having to think about this idea of a strong Black woman, even in the midst of the system, but they can now walk
Yes.
in that, in a way that empowers them, not in a way that shrinks them.
Mm-hmm. We
But
have
can
some.
it be, yeah, I'm just curious though, can it be our superpower and our kryptonite?
100%. 100%.
Mm.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is why it's important to, as we were talking about, slow it down, right? Figure out when it's becoming the kryptonite, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
So that they can come back to because it's a spectrum, right? Just much
Mm-hmm.
like everything in our space in mental health, everything is on a spectrum, right? It's just a matter of
Mm.
sometimes we are not, we're so caught up that we're missing the cues that, okay, we're entering that kryptonite,
Yep.
season. We need to
Mm-hmm.
bring it back down to how we ultimately have wanted to define it.
Mm-hmm.
But we have some comments. So one person from Toronto, her name's Jenny. She's a first-time viewer. She's saying thanks for this
Oh,
topic.
hey,
Welcome,
Jenny.
Jenny. Thanks for
Welcome,
tuning
Jenny.
in. Uh, Another person, Bob from the UK. He says, Black women are well cultured. I have one in my house and I'm proud of her. Yeah. And then the third comment is from Nigeria, from Lagos. Black men need strong women to guide them. So any comments on any of the comments that have come through, ladies?
Well, welcome to Jenny.
Yeah.
That's great. And thanks for the other comments as well. And, I think one of the things, especially when we talked about, having support and accountability and that ability to have people who will tell you to like take off your cape, our partners are integral to that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in terms of some of the two comments here that we had about the Black men and the Black women, it's that, yeah, in healthy partnerships, that strength is, formidable. But when it's not coming across in that healthy way, that's when it becomes really detrimental. That's when we get to our high functioning. That's when it brings into this over functioning where we, end up having, those different variations of depression, and I would equally say anxiety as well, that show up, as well as some of just the stress breakdown, burnout. I think that's something that I'm seeing so much amongst
Mm-hmm.
our sisters is just burnout,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's important to maybe even just pause there and like define that burnout is like when stress got so bad that
Mm-hmm.
literally, if you were to think about it like in terms of like a fire, like the whole
Yeah.
house is gutted, right? And
Mm.
so the repair of that is so astronomical, in terms of how much it costs to really and truly clean up after a fire has completely burnt everything out. And that's essentially what burnout is. And so I think it is important that as much as we are, being mindful of, how we want to define this for ourselves in a healthy way, but we recognize that, yeah, when it can run on its own, it can lead to really catastrophic outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Even as I look at the comment, Black men need strong women, I think that we need each other
Mm-hmm.
because one can't be overcompensating over the next. It has to be strength and relying on each other, right? Because, yes, like Black women, the matriarch of the family, she's it fully embodied strength. She raises the next generation of children, but it's a partnership,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
relying on each other, giving each other the rest. Someone said that, some Black women take it the wrong way if they are referred to as strong Black women, and this comes from England, right? Why do you think that that would be?
It's
What?
interesting. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
No, it came to me because I recently was working through that with a client. They hated being called strong. It was like a word that they did not like. And we really had to actively work through defining it for themselves and kind of going back to those internalized messages that they received about that and what they came to understand about what it meant for them to be strong. And they decided they wanted a different word because they didn't like the word strong. And so, I think in terms of this comment, it just popped into my mind is that, you know, maybe it's not so much that we pre-label somebody with that, but maybe we ask them, right? Like, what does it mean for you to be? Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that you're really strong. I definitely see that you're really confident, but how would you define that for yourself? because this has taken on, a definition all of its own and a narrative all of its own. That, I can see why some women wouldn't want to embody it as it stands.
And I think the idea of being referred to, there's a lack of choice, right? Maybe some Black women just feel like, I'd like some more choice. Maybe I don't want to be strong today. Maybe it's just exhausting. Maybe I feel burnt out. Maybe I feel exhausted. Maybe I feel overwhelmed. Maybe I feel anxious. Maybe I don't want to be the strong Black woman today. And I think the more that we can give women choice to define where they are. I said this before about seasons. What season are you in? And a season is not just, 4 times a year that it changes. A season is even within a day. I might wake up and I wake up energized and refreshed and I'm ready to go. And in that season of my day, I might actually feel like a strong Black woman. But something might happen by 12 noon and it just knocks me on my ass. And that's it.
Yeah.
Right? I don't feel like a strong Black woman at that point. I just want to sit with people who love me, who care about me. Maybe I need to call one of my friends and say, girl, just pray over me. The point really here is that I think that Black women just need a choice. They don't have to be a strong Black woman. And so if we can just help them to know, if we could just get that message out, make the choice for yourself. You know yourself best. This is not a one size fits all. This is customization. You get the best deal. You get to personalize it, right? And so choose for yourself what you need, right? And that requires attunement. You have to attune to yourself and to see for yourself, where am I right now?
Absolutely.
That you're actually taking the pulse and you're saying, where am I right now? What do I need right now? And what I need might be different in 5 minutes or 5 hours, and that's okay. But I can just walk through in a way that is healthy and helpful for me and my nervous system, for me and my life.
Absolutely. And I think this goes right back to Superman. Because Superman isn't in his cape all day, right? He goes back to the farm to just be with his parents. Now he has a dog, I'm not going to give no spoiler alerts for the new Superman movie.
I knew you were going with this.
But when we feel like we have to wear a certain cape all the time, we're not allowed to take it off. When it's the same thing as this label. So I have to be the strong Black woman today. I have to put it on. I have to keep it on, and I'm not allowed to take it off. It's like the thing that haunts us. But even like everyone has to have the freedom to feel their feelings in the moment. We don't feel strong all the time. That's just the truth. We have strength. It's embodied. We are resilient. It's embodied, but we don't necessarily feel that all the time, and that's okay. But when we have, the strong Black woman, trope, it's like, oh, I'm not allowed to have these moments of softness and tenderness. I'm not allowed, because I'm supposed to be the strong Black woman. And that's where we get the high functioning burnout. And that's where we start to disintegrate and fall apart. And then we can't hold it together in some areas, but we hide it because we have to be the strong Black woman. And I think that that's why a lot of women are moving away from it. Like, I don't want to, right? And I think then it has to be a redefining of what strength even means.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, this whole idea of a continuum, right? Because I wonder, even as we're talking about this topic from the lenses that we've actually looked at it through, how many women feel like they actually don't measure up to that, and so they feel like the sense of shame, or the sense of maybe they're not Black enough, all of these things, because they don't fit into that stereotype. And that's why I want to just kind of like shine a light there a little bit, because all it is a stereotype. And the more that we can actually dismantle the stereotype, the more freedom everybody gets to just choose how they're living their own lives.
Yeah. And I think, to kind of piggyback on that a little bit, Char, too, is and I mean, I don't mean to be pessimistic about it, because I mean, I came in saying, we got to rename this for ourselves, and, the thing that all of this happens on a spectrum. But, the looming thing in the background is that systemic issue, right? And as much as it's I would love for us to get to that point where we can do this, right? It does intersect with us greatly. And depending on, many different variables, those points of intersection can be really burdensome. And so, I think that idea of, how many women don't feel like they're measuring up, right? And that might be something that you've internalized, but really and truly, like, you've held it all together, sis. Everything is still moving, right? Like, the kids are great, your partner, things are all right there, you've got your job, or you've got your business, you have your, like, things are doing really well, but still, it's almost as if from a systemic lens, the goalpost changes every generation as to, essentially, how do we define this? What does this look like, and how you're supposed to show up? Where even when you're doing all the things, right? A part of what brings on that emotional exhaustion, is the fact that the goalposts moved for us again.
So I'm curious, because we've talked about this from like a more theoretical perspective. I'm curious, for like everybody here, how are we living this out then? Like, because we keep saying that we're supposed to take off the mantle, right? And how are we going to live it out? Because I think that's helpful to kind of work it through and share that.
Well, I think for me, I've given myself the permission to be soft.
Good.
Yes, sis. Yes, sis.
I'm just like, if I'm going to feel my feelings today, I'm going to feel it.
Yes.
And it's a choice. It's intentional, right? If I need to cry, I'm going to cry. They're going to drip, 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 drip until I'm done. And then I say, okay, all right. Now I pick myself back up. I got to keep going. But again, it's an intentional choice to be soft.
Yeah. And tears are not a sign of weakness, right? Feelings are not good or bad. They're just information.
You just use your therapist voice, Char.
Yeah. It is what it is, y'all.
Can't take the therapist out and I have to echo that I have allowed myself to get to really operate from my soft girl. I'm in my soft girl era. I'm having a soft girl summer. And not that I 100% even know what that means, because that was something I had to realize, is that I'm like, I've never had a soft girl era. I have no idea even what that even means or what that looks like. So I had to define that for myself. And I've come to this idea of, right now, in this current season for me, it's guarding my peace. And even if that does not necessarily make other people happy, that's okay, because it's making me happy. And that means, I don't do what I don't want to do. And I don't go where I don't want to go. I don't speak to who I don't want to speak to. I am guarding my peace. And I'm realizing that in doing that, it is bringing out a softer side of me, because I don't have to be on all the time.
Absolutely. Yes, Dudley. Give yourself permission to be soft. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I love how the Love Bay family is showing up in the chat today. Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah.
And so, to answer the question for myself, I would say that um, compassion has been my word,
Mm.
right? How do
Mm-hmm.
I tend to myself with compassion? And it's
Yes.
helpful to be a therapist because then you're saying it to other people, and then you walk out of your office and you're like, all right, I got to
Mhm.
do that too.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? It's the best accountability.
That's it when we preach.
Sure.
Right? And so it's like I choose because it's a choice. I choose
Yes.
to actually turn towards myself with a sense of compassion, with a sense of curiosity. What is happening within me? What I need to
Mm.
do about it right now in this moment? This is why I
Yes.
slow things down for myself, right? A
Yes.
few years ago, I discovered this idea of slow living, right?
Mhm.
And I've been exploring that for the last few years. What does slow living mean? How do you just take everything
Mm.
and just slow it down, right? I'm not interested in the hustle and the grind of it all.
Yeah.
Instead, I want to nurture myself. I want to find ways to fill my bucket. I want to find ways to tend to the wounded parts of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And a huge part of that for me is actually coming back to my lineage, coming back to my culture, coming back to my history, and recognizing that the hustle and grind is a very North American way of doing things. It's a Western way of doing things. But man, when I go back to this idea of slow living, I remember how they used to, just like Felicia said earlier, sit underneath the mango tree having some mango and just chatting.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I'm going back to that.
Yes.
In this place, I'm carving out the space to go back and do that slow living for myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's with intention.
Yeah.
So, as we wrap up for tonight, ladies, I'm going to ask you, what is one word, one truth, or one hope that you want to leave with the listeners tonight?
My word is choice.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we feel like we don't have a choice, we do. Even if it's small, even if it's incremental. And if we make that decision, if we just have that mindset that there is a choice to move forward from this, we can do one small thing today that has a ripple effect that can really
Yes.
impact our lives in a big way, in a monumental way long term. So don't look at the big picture. Don't look at the down the road. Don't look at the big goals that you're hoping for in 20 years. Look and see the choice that you can make today in terms of this topic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Can you today just choose to go to bed a little bit earlier?
Mhm.
Can you choose to just turn off the social media and say, I'm not going to take in all of that junk that's telling me
Mm-hmm.
that I don't measure up? What can you choose to do today is really the invitation that if you do this long term, it
Mm-hmm.
actually does help you and it helps your health outcomes over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had two words that popped in my head because I can never be
Yes.
simple.
Yes. I love it. I love
But one of them was
it.
actually, in line with Char's word. And I had agency and authenticity, right? And this idea of,
Mm,
giving yourself, the agency to be authentic, whatever that looks like for you. And perhaps making those incremental choices will reveal to you essentially what is authentic for you to be operating
mm,
from, this space at this season. Um, but I do think that you giving yourself that permission as opposed to waiting for others spaces to give you that permission to do that, and know that that is your right. And that is our birthright. Ancestrally, that
Yes.
is our birthright, to be able to determine for ourselves and name for ourselves who we are and how we want to show up. And so those were the two words that came for me.
I love it. I love it. And I'm just gonna tell my Love Bay family, rest. Beloved, rest. It's okay. Take off the cape and embrace self-love. It's okay. Give yourself the permission. So until next time, Love Bay family, next week we have our Wild Card Tuesday, and we have the incredible Jillian Wells with us next week. And it's going to be dynamic. So until next week, Love Bay family, thank you for tuning in. Peace out.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.